Hey everyone. Today I'm really excited for you to have the chance to listen to my conversation with David Wolfgram. David is a very influential leader in my life and at a young age helped me to start to understand how to hold the paradox of numbers meaning everything and how powerful numbers can be and how numbers also don't mean anything. And so we get into that conversation today. I promise you it'll be very insightful. This is something that really is important in business especially. And how do we utilize numbers in a powerful way and not have them be the reason that we're showing up and engaging. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
So for our listener who doesn't know you, this is Dave Wolfgram, who happens to be the man that was my mission president when I served a mission in Italy several years ago now, which is hard to believe. It's been over 10 years. Well, today time goes by. Yeah. So, Dave, why don't you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about your professional background, which comes into play as far as like why I wanted to have you on the podcast. There's many reasons, and it partially was because of your professional background. So can you just give us a little bit of an idea of what you have spent your career doing and what
Sure.
you've been engaged in?
Sure, you bet. I'm basically an accountant by profession. I started my career with a land developing company. I won't mention the name, but a land developing company that in the late 70s, early 80s, the economy kind of took a turn and land development just was really difficult. And our company was stuck with a lot of land and lots. And so we scratched our heads and we said, well, what can we do? And we decided to start building homes. And over time, that company became the largest home builder in Utah. And I was the CFO, the chief financial officer of that company for a number of years. And then I basically retired and went on a mission to Italy where I met you.
Yeah.
In 2010 is when I left. And I think you came in about 2012.
2011.
2011, okay, into Italy. And when I ended my mission, this company called me and asked me if I would consider coming back out of retirement and be their president. They never had a president. So I thought, oh, they're creating a position. So I came back, and then a year later, the owner of the company was called on a mission for 3 years, and they asked me to run it. So I was the CEO of that company for 3 years. And I might just interject here. It's interesting during that time. Qualtrics, the company that's made billions, and Ryan Smith, the owner of the Jazz and others, who were the owners, have become billionaires. But they're all about numbers. And I remember Qualtrics coming to me. I had heard about them and kind of trying to sell me on the importance of numbers and all that. And they told me, and I thought, well, gee, I scratched my head. I thought, well, we can do these numbers ourselves. In fact, we do them. But Qualtrics has a way of bringing the meaning of those numbers to life.
Yeah.
We didn't go with them, but that's basically why I'm here, I think, is to talk about numbers. And so following my stint as CEO of this company, we started a mortgage company, and I was the CFO of that and was there for 5 years and retired. And so you're calling me out of retirement about numbers.
To talk about numbers again. That's right. Okay, so I still remember, I don't remember which church building or city we were in, but I remember the meeting we were in when you stood up and you were talking about numbers. And okay, so for those of you who may not know, when you're on a mission, you're obviously there to serve and teach and invite people to come into Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of numbers that go into looking at, okay, what did we do this week? What are our goals for the month or for the week? And so I remember you standing up and saying, and you can correct me if this is not accurate, the way I remember it was you said, numbers mean nothing and numbers mean everything. And I remember in my 19-year-old mind trying to wrap my head around that and recognizing like, well, that's a significant paradox. What do I do with that? How do I hold both of those?
I do remember that. In fact, you traveled with me, and I don't know, but we would meet in these various cities throughout the mission. Someone had to go to Venice and Florence and Milano, I mean, crap cities, and it'll really tough life. Yeah, I know. But I remember saying that, and the first time I said it, I remember kind of a shocked look on the faces of some of the missionaries, and I think I repeated something similar to that, that numbers are everything, and yet they're nothing. And of course, they're what I'm talking about. And I think it's that way in business and in everything that we do. I mean, we see it played out in global warming, for example. Years ago, people were worrying about it. They were doing uh, statistical
Like analyses. Yeah.
analysis, yeah, of what was going on and greenhouse emissions and things like that. And then there's some that actually get into it and they can see it, and you look in the history and you think maybe there's something to it because there's a lot of skepticism out there. And so I found that in the mission when I was referring to we have all these numbers out there, and I was finding that we have numbers that come from other missions in Europe that we were privy to, and they have our numbers, and that is how many people are you teaching, how many are coming to church, and how many contacts, and so on and so forth. And of course, what is the most important number to a missionary? Well, missionaries would hear all these numbers and would actually be depressing or discouraging to some of the missionary, right? And to others, they would think, "Oh, great, I need to do X, Y, and Z to get the widget at the end of the assembly line." Which, of course, we don't look at that way as missionary. But what is the most important number? And that's what I was referring to. And it's the people you're teaching. You know, does that statistic, or in this case, a person, have a name? Does it have a family, a job? What are his likes or dislikes, or what's their story? Have they ever felt God's love in their life? Things like that. And as soon as when you can start getting the feel of that for that one statistic or person, we never called them a statistic, but um, then you can kind of start feeling the heartbeat of what you're doing, and it can bring some energy into your work. And that's when the numbers start meaning something. And you can expand from that one number to the other numbers, kind of working the way that you should. A lot of times we hear all these numbers and we work from the top down. And in this case, you try to find the heartbeat of the number and you work from the bottom up. And that's basically what I was trying to say. This plethora of numbers that we hear, and the statistics and all of that, and you know, they are meaningless unless you can actually get down to the bottom.
Yeah. Okay. That's so good. So I have obviously I saw that on the mission, right? What you're saying about all these numbers, and it can be a little bit depressing if you're not hitting them. Or if you are given or set these goals and then you don't achieve them, it can be depressing. I see the same thing in business, working with leadership teams and companies, that a lot of people experience that same thing. It's like we have numbers, and then what happens when 3 weeks in a row, 3 months in a row, we're not hitting up. So what can you say to that? Like in your experience, obviously from being a very much a numbers guy in the business world, what did that look like in business? Because obviously you mentioned on mission field, it was more like getting to that person and their life and their story. What does that look like in the business world to try to use numbers as a tool and yet find some motivation that's not solely a number in like home building? What did that look like?
Well, let me give you an example. This is a real life example that's actually in progress right now.
Okay.
Even though I've repeated this many times, and I mean the process many times in my professional career, but right now I'm a consultant for a company, and they build commercial buildings, not like more industrial type buildings. It's a chilled up type building, maybe 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. That's a lot of space.
Yeah.
And right now, um, they have a perfect location for a 50,000 square foot building, and they want to build it. They want to put it up. And so the people I consult with, they say, well, we need to go out and do a pro forma. Well, what do you mean by a pro forma? Well, you, we need to go out and we need to look at what the cash flow is going to be. We need to know what our costs are going to be on this building. We need to know what the city's going to require. There's traffic, parking, all these type of requirements that go into the cost of the building. And then you have the plans that need to be costed out and value engineered and things like that. And then you accumulate all those costs, and now you're stuck with, well, where's the money going to come from to support the decision to build a building? Well, it's going to come from people leasing the building. So you make assumptions on your tenants and leases and all of that. Well, then you have to decide, well, this building's going to cost $13 million. So where's that money going to come from? Well, okay, we don't have it in our back pocket, in our wallet, and so we're going to need a bank or investors. But if we can show how good this return is going to be, investors will flock to us. That's kind of the assumption. And so you put your numbers together and you go, you decide they look so good that you're going to pitch investors. You don't do that yet. This is all pro forma. Yeah. Okay. This is you put this together to get the green light from the owner that this is going to work. And so they put all this stuff together, and I could see, as a consultant, I could see there's some holes in it, but let them go forward, do it, and we'll tweak it when they put it before the owner. And they put it before the owner, and the owner looked at it, and it looked, boy, they're going to get a rate of return of 17% over 10 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. You don't need
Yeah, most people would sign up for that.
Yeah, right. And so the owner asked just one simple question: do you have a lease? Well, what do you mean? Do we have a lease? It's just a pro forma. Well, yeah, but do you have any? Do you have an LOI, a letter of intent? Do you have any pre-leased agreements? And who are the tenants? You want some good, solid tenants with good, solid financials to make that kind of investment. And all of a sudden, all this excitement went down the tube. And so we look at it, and right now it's on hold. But we have just finished a building similar to that, so we kind of have the track record in that, what's going to go on. But what you need to do, and this goes back to the missionary example, you need to find, and that owner, of course, he hit the nail on the head. He said, what is the heartbeat of these numbers that's going to make these numbers live? And so now they're out with real estate agents trying to pre-lease this dream. It hasn't been built yet, so it's a building that's going to be built, and those numbers are going to be revised. But the owner's just kind of waiting to see, and he knows what he's doing. He knows he's going to build a building. He wants his staff to be on board to on know how to put these things together, because it's kind of a young group of people right now. And so the I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah, but the analyses that you do to provide something are just numbers. And the more familiar you can become with your numbers, the quicker they move from being a statistic to being real. They no longer just count; they matter. And that's what we're trying to do and teach these people, and because they matter a lot as to the success of a project.
Yeah. So how I love that, like, I love this theme here, like, find the heartbeat of the number. What do you usually find? I mean, I'm thinking it's probably on my shirt, right? Like,
Yeah, people.
that what you find as the heartbeat of the number is people.
Yeah.
At some degree, you're influencing people. Like, at the heartbeat of any number in business, there's people.
You're exactly right. And in this case, with this owner, it's a tenant. Well,
Yeah.
tenants are people. They're people, right? And I remember when Qualtrics was pitching us at our home building company, and they were showing how they could go look at the process of getting a buyer from start to finish on building the home from cradle to grave, all these kind of things. And they measure every aspect of it. And throughout that process, there are dead zones that you could fill with productivity. And if you can fill it with productivity, you can shorten the manufacturing process, things like that. Well, the bottom line is it will increase your profitability. And that's the power of numbers. Well, how do you find that heartbeat? You said it distills down to the people. And sometimes might be the consumer, but sometimes the people in your organization are also, you got to look at them because these numbers can be a little discouraging to them and they can meet numbers with resistance saying, oh, that'll never work. And they might be right. They might be wrong, but, you don't know until you can put a positive spin, you can find that heartbeat, and the heartbeat of the numbers is when they really resonate with you. You go, I can see that vision. I can see those numbers working for me. The people are going in my organization are going to accept and embrace this process because they'll be able to see it. And that's where Qualtrics is so good. They have salespeople that come out and they help bring life to all the numbers that they pitch at you.
Yeah. So I have a theory, and I'm curious your take on it, that when you can use numbers as a powerful tool like you're talking about and simultaneously connect it to a heartbeat, where I like to say that numbers become the guide, but not the motivation. What? So part of my theory is that when that happens, it becomes inevitable that the goals and the numbers and the targets get hit. Is that your experience, that when people can use numbers as a guide, but numbers are not the motivation, they almost always hit their numbers?
Yeah.
Is that your experience as well?
That is my experience because you can make numbers say anything,
Right.
but you have to know what's real and then what's real and then go for being real and then really mattering. Um, I I've had through the organization where I worked, I can think of 3 people that, they got out of college, they got like a couple of them had their MBAs and they came in and they worked for us for a while. And then they decided they wanted to go to Columbia. And there's 3 of them that did it, not all together, but over a sequence of years. And they got their master's in real estate development. Well, that's kind of what they did for us, real estate development. But, we had Excel spreadsheets and things that they worked on. Well, at Columbia, it's like Excel spreadsheets put on a turbocharge, you know, rocket boosters. And they came out of that program just fired up because they found that numbers can tell you anything and it can motivate you. Well, they kind of hit a wall similar to the wall that this group I'm consulting with hit when the owner said, who were the tenants, you know, they found out that, oh, it really comes down to the heartbeat or making these numbers that we put in our pro formas because we can show internal rate of returns that are, above market and would be enticing for people to come and put their money into and things like that. But they don't mean anything until you can show them that you have something tangible, real, that really matters. And so, long answer to your question, numbers are a guide, but they aren't the bottom line.
Yeah, they're not the reason.
Why? The reason why.
I've heard it said that oftentimes the things that we can count don't always actually count, and the things that we can't count really count. And again, that was my experience of you and your wife Sue on the mission, was that numbers were a tool. I remember feeling this, like having the space and freedom from you or with you, that the numbers didn't actually matter. And yet we took them very seriously. They did matter. And so one of the things that I saw the two of you do on the mission that made it worked for me, like this whole how do we have both and hold the numbers that don't matter and they do matter, was your emphasis on what you called it, grow every missionary or gem, and which ultimately came down to love the person that you're working with.
Yeah.
Serve them, love them unconditionally. And it seems like things work out. So when that message gets taken to the business world, sometimes it is met, at least for me, with some eye rolls or some skepticism. What can you say about that? And share your experience in business? Like, where does love and service fit into this equation of like what actually counts in business?
Well, what my Matt's referring to here is when Sue and I went out to Italy and they kind of charged us with a goal to grow every missionary. It's not about getting convert baptisms. It's not about that.
Not about the numbers.
It's not about the no. Thank you. It's about helping every missionary that's willing to leave their life behind and spend 18 months or 24 months to selflessly serve other people. What can you do to grow them? And when we came out, we had like 150 missionaries, young missionaries, and maybe 5 senior couples. And by the time we left, we had 250 single missionaries and 10 senior couples. And we knew this was an insurmountable task for 1 or 2 people, me and my wife, to do. And so it just hit us. Well, we can't do it. Let's throw up the white flag and surrender. But we didn't want to surrender. We thought, no, that there's got to be a way to deal with this through the numbers that we were looking at. And it was to have every missionary responsible, not to himself, but to his companion. And if that one person is being responsible to his companion, meaning I'm going to make in your case, my companion a good missionary, a great missionary, that means I'm going to have to get outside myself. I'm going to have to look at his needs. We're here to teach. I got to be a little more proactive and find people to teach so that he has teaching opportunities. I'm going to introduce him to members, to other people. I mean, you're doing things you normally wouldn't do because you're motivated by the fact that you're trying to make him a better person. And at the same time, you're making yourself a better person. Now, how did that translate? In an ideal world, it'd be great, but when you're working colleagues, sometimes you're in competition with each other. And sometimes you actually get excited when the person you're in competition with looks bad, does something bad.
Yeah.
But the way that you do that is, and I know a lot of larger companies have teams and team approaches and things like that, which is really good. But if you're creating a team, you want every team member to be pulling for that team. And you see that in sports, where team members just gel. And you see it also happen in sports where they don't gel. And you've seen that with our local Utah Jazz, where they come together, and then when they haven't, and then they get traded, the team gets decimated, and the season goes down the toilet for a year or two. But I don't have a quick fix for that. I don't have I wish I could say, oh, this is what you do. But you have to have people that are willing to acknowledge successes within your team, within your workforce. And I know where I work, they try to do that in company meetings, and that's good, but it's not the same because you have maybe the president of the company or someone saying, "Hey, so and so did so much last month. He gets to drive the company car for the next month," and that's cool. But what really makes a difference is when someone gets a pat on the back from someone that they work with or a supervisor saying, "You are doing a super job," and that just, in my experience, pumps them up. And that goes further than a financial bonus or a public thank you in the company. Something like that just seems to motivate people to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I think when that happens, I think it's right back to what we were saying before about the heartbeat. Like that person that's reaching out to their team member or to their colleague in celebration or praise has found that heartbeat.
Yeah.
Which is a person behind the numbers. It's so good. it's kind of another one of this is another thing I remember thinking as a 19-year-old listening to you talk, is that in fact, I probably wrote it down somewhere and I've read it in the last 10 years, that almost everything in life feels like a paradox. That this idea that numbers don't matter and they do. This idea, like, if I make it all about my companion and not about me, it actually helps me the most. I mean, it just feels like there's so many of these things that are a paradox. Anything you would say about that? Like, what have you learned about a paradox and the ability to hold and reconcile two things that don't seem like they're supposed to go together?
I think you really hit a real key principle in life, in realizing that. And uh, because the, it's a little bit like golf. If you want the ball to go up, you have to swing down. If you want it to go far, you have to swing easy and have tempo. And it's just intuitively different than what you would think. And I think progress in life comes that way, where you you want things to be easy and find success, but an easy pathway doesn't create the challenges, the difficulties that's going to teach you the things you have to do to learn success. And so, um, when you realize that you have these challenging moments in life, you try to have someone there standing behind you, whispering in your ear, "Be this is a growing moment. This is where you're going to learn, and you're going to stand on higher ground after this. You're going to be of much more value to the people you're working for." But those are moments that can become discouraging too, and the people can take a step back and go, "Oh, what's the use?" But that I would just say, just try to realize that these difficult moments that you go through, welcome them, because they're the opportunities to grow. The reason I think I've been successful in my career with this company is because we've gone through a lot of hard times. The economy changes. We're on the brink of bankruptcy. The attorney says, just take out bankruptcy and start over again. And the owner of the company wouldn't hear of it. We went to banks. We talked to them. We promised them we'd do this and that and the other, and we waited through the 2 or 3 years of recession and uh, gradually came out on top. And I'll tell you, my greatest learning moments I've ever had in my career was that time, those 2 or 3 years, where everything was hitting the fan, and you learned to deal with it. And I'm just glad that I had someone standing behind me, like the owner of the company, saying, "Dave, you can do this."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Well, the name of our podcast is The Everyday Leader, and so we'll probably end right there with what you just kind of brought up, which is how useful it is to have a leader, and that when things get tough and when you're trying to hold a paradox or hold something that's challenging you, it seems like the way that we get through that kind of stuff is someone shows up to be a leader. What would you say to that? Any like final thoughts on what you've learned about that, about leaders, how they show up, and leadership in general, and how we can show up that way every day, regardless of our role or our title?
Well, a successful leader learns to lead himself each day. I mean, he has a plan, or she has a plan on what to do, and hopefully that plan includes strengthening somebody. Look at the people that you have direct responsibility for, and who might need that pat on the back, or need that counsel, or need a little guidance. Um, People love to feel like they're somewhat autonomous in their positions. They like to feel like, you know, the success and failure of what they're doing rests on them. But there are leaders who try to control that and say, no, all that rests on me, and I'm going to dictate every step that you make, and that is way too confining. And so, if you're a leader, you want people to feel that autonomy and feel that they have that movement available, but you're there to help whisper in their ear, "Dave, you can do this. You got this." That sort of thing. And there's a fine line in being able to do that. But the companies I've seen work successfully with happy employees people that rarely leave. The company I'm consulting with is a large company in construction right now. It's probably the largest one in Utah. And their employees don't leave them, and there's a reason for that. They know how to work this autonomy, and they have their structure worked in a way that financially, bonuses, things like that, that help them as well. But I've been impressed with how they operate. So I would just say, look at your people that you have direct responsibility for, starting with yourself, and then seeing where the needs are. And if you don't see any, then stand back and applaud and let them know you're applauding for them and pat them on the back. I love that.
And you don't see any direct need, letting stand back and find something to be, happy about and celebrate.
I always felt just on this, that this one man I worked for early on, and I still talk to some of the people that worked at that time for him, and they refer to him as a cheerleader. He was our greatest cheerleader. And I thought, what a great uh, tribute to a person that was head of the organization, and they just felt he was their cheerleader.
Yeah. Wow. He's someone that found the heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about before. Yeah. It's been so good. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. And I know this has been helpful to our listener and the ability to reconcile this whole numbers don't matter and yet they matter. And so for our listener, I hope that they can find the heartbeat behind the numbers in their life and their business.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.